My name is Angelina. I'm 32, and until last month, I was the woman who had it all: successful career, beautiful home, and what I thought was a loving marriage. That changed in an instant when a cup of scalding coffee hit my face, leaving me with more than just physical burns. It was the moment my husband showed me exactly who he was, all because I refused to give my credit card to his sister again. If you're watching this from somewhere safe, please hit like and subscribe. I promise my story will show you that sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do when someone tries to control your life and finances. I met James 5 years ago at a financial planning conference in Chicago. I was presenting on investment strategies for young professionals, and he approached me afterward with thoughtful questions and a charming smile. He was tall, with kind brown eyes and a confident demeanour that instantly drew me in. A successful architect with his own firm, James, seemed like the perfect match: intelligent, ambitious, and genuinely interested in my work. Our courtship was a whirlwind of fancy dinners, weekend trips, and deep conversations about our dreams and future. 6 months later, he proposed during a sunrise hike in Sedona. The ring was stunning, a vintage sapphire that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation, believing I'd found my person. The first 3 years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We bought a beautiful craftsman-style house in a quiet neighbourhood, travelled to Europe twice, and built what I thought was an equal partnership. James supported my career growth when I was promoted to senior financial advisor at my firm. I was making more money than him, but he never seemed threatened by it. Instead, he'd proudly introduce me as the financial genius in the family. We had separate accounts for personal expenses, but maintained a joint account for household costs. The system worked perfectly, and financial disagreements were never an issue. That began to change when Bethany, James's younger sister, moved to our city after her divorce. She was 3 years younger than James, with the same warm smile, but none of his ambition or responsibility. Bethany had always struggled financially, bouncing between jobs and relationships. James explained she'd had a difficult time after their parents died when she was in college, and he'd always felt responsible for her well-being. At first, I was sympathetic. Family is important, and I wanted to support James in helping his sister get back on her feet. Bethany stayed with us for 2 weeks while apartment hunting. During that time, I noticed concerning patterns. She'd sleep until noon, spend hours online shopping, and make vague references to investment opportunities that sounded suspiciously like pyramid schemes. When she finally found an apartment, James asked if we could help with the security deposit. I agreed, assuming it was a one-time assistance, but within months, Bethany was struggling to pay rent. James asked if we could loan her money just until she found stable employment. Again, I agreed, but suggested we set up a repayment plan. James brushed it off, saying family shouldn't need contracts. Over the next year, these loans became regular occurrences. Bethany always had a crisis: car repairs, medical bills, or just tight months. Each time, James would transfer money from our joint account without discussing it first. When I raised concerns, he'd become defensive. "She's my only family, Angelina. What am I supposed to do? Let her become homeless." The real breaking point came when I discovered James had given Bethany access to our joint credit card for emergencies. Reviewing the statement, I found charges for designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and even a weekend spa getaway. When confronted, James claimed Bethany had promised to pay it back. The statement showed over $7,000 in charges in a single month. That night, we had our first major fight. I wasn't just angry about the money, I was hurt by the deception. James had hidden the card from me, knowing I wouldn't approve. During the argument, he let slip that Bethany hadn't actually been looking for work. She was focusing on her wellness journey after the divorce trauma. "You don't understand what she's been through," he said, his voice cold. "Not everyone has your perfect life and emotional control." His words stung. My perfect life had been built through hard work, after growing up with a single mother who struggled to keep us housed and fed. James knew my background, but suddenly seemed to have forgotten it. That night marked a shift in our marriage. James became increasingly secretive about financial matters. I began checking our accounts more frequently and discovered he had been transferring significant amounts to Bethany, over $20,000 in 6 months. Money that was meant for our future, our planned children's college funds, taken without discussion. When I confronted him again, his demeanor changed. The warm, supportive husband disappeared, replaced by someone cold and manipulative. He accused me of being controlling, materialistic, and heartless toward family. He reminded me that I earned more, so I should be more generous. The conversations left me feeling confused and questioning my own values. Was I being selfish? Wasn't family supposed to help each other, but something didn't feel right about Bethany's constant needs and James's secrecy? I decided to take action to protect our finances. I moved most of my income to my personal account, leaving just enough in the joint account to cover my share of household expenses. When James noticed, he was furious. "So this is how little you trust me after everything we've built together." His anger was disproportionate, making me even more certain I'd made the right decision. Something was very wrong with our financial situation, and I needed to protect myself while I figured it out. The final revelation came when I received a call from our mortgage lender. We were 3 months behind on payments, despite the fact that I'd been depositing my share into the joint account each month. James had been withdrawing the mortgage money to give to Bethany. We were at risk of foreclosure on our dream home, and he hadn't said a word. That night, I discovered that James and Bethany had been planning to use my good credit and savings to fund a lifestyle coaching business for Bethany. They had already registered the business and created marketing materials using my image and credentials without permission to lend legitimacy to the venture. The betrayal cut deep. As the stress over money escalated, our home atmosphere became increasingly tense. James and I could barely have a conversation that didn't end in an argument. After discovering the mortgage delinquency, I insisted we needed to set firm boundaries with Bethany. "We need to stop giving her money immediately," I said during one particularly heated discussion. "She's an adult, and we're enabling her irresponsibility." "You just don't want her in our lives," James snapped. "You've always been jealous of our relationship." This accusation was absurd. I had spent the first years of our marriage trying to build a relationship with Bethany, inviting her to dinners, helping her update her resume, and even using my professional contacts to find job opportunities for her. My efforts were met with broken commitments and thinly veiled resentment. I proposed a compromise. We would help Bethany create a realistic budget and financial plan. I would use my expertise to help her consolidate any debts and find legitimate employment. We could even cover the cost of career counseling or additional education if needed. "She doesn't need your charity or judgment," James said dismissively. "What she needs is family support during a difficult time." "It's been 2 years since her divorce," I pointed out. "At what point does difficult time become lifestyle choice?" This comment earned me days of cold silence from James. Meanwhile, our savings continued to dwindle. The following week, I took matters into my own hands and scheduled a lunch with Bethany, hoping to understand her perspective better and perhaps offer direct help without James as the intermediary. She arrived an hour late, ordered the most expensive item on the menu, and spent most of the meal checking her phone. When I gently asked about her job search, she looked at me with undisguised contempt. "Not everyone is built for the corporate rat race like you, Angelina. I'm exploring more authentic career paths aligned with my personal journey." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. She vaguely mentioned networking opportunities and building her personal brand on Instagram, where she posted daily about luxury products and exclusive experiences, all funded by our money. During our lunch, she excused herself twice to take calls. I could clearly hear her making plans for a weekend trip to Miami with friends. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked Bethany's social media accounts thoroughly. What I found confirmed my suspicions. While claiming financial hardship, she was living a lifestyle of designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and frequent vacations. In one post, she even bragged about a generous family sponsor funding her authentic lifestyle journey, undoubtedly referring to James and our money. Armed with this information, I confronted James, showing him the posts and expenditures matched against the timing of his transfers to Bethany. Instead of being shocked or disappointed, James became defensive. She's building a personal brand. It's an investment in her future as an influencer. She has fewer than 500 followers, James. That's not a business model. It's a hobby at best and a delusion at worst. Our argument escalated until James finally revealed his true feelings. You've never understood what it means to have real family loyalty. You're so obsessed with your financial rules and independence that you can't see beyond spreadsheets. Money is meant to be spent on people you love. This fundamental difference in our values became the new centerpiece of our conflicts. James increasingly portrayed me as cold, calculating, and unfeeling, a characterization that my friends and colleagues would find laughable. I was always the one organizing birthday celebrations, remembering anniversaries, and supporting friends through difficulties. But in our home, I became the villain for expecting basic financial responsibility. As tensions grew, I made a final attempt to salvage both our finances and our marriage. I created a detailed financial analysis showing our current trajectory. If things continued, we would be bankrupt within 18 months, potentially losing our home and destroying both our credit ratings for years to come. This isn't about Bethany, I explained. This is about our future. Everything we've worked for is at risk. James barely glanced at my carefully prepared presentation. There you go again, reducing everything to numbers. This is about family, Angelina, something you clearly don't value the way I do. His words hurt more than he knew. My mother had sacrificed everything to give me opportunities, working multiple jobs to put me through college. I had helped support her ever since my first job, setting up her retirement fund and making sure she would never worry about money again. I understood family obligation better than most, but in James's narrative, I had become the enemy. He began excluding me from social gatherings, meeting friends without me, and apparently sharing his version of our conflicts. Friends we'd had for years began treating me differently, some even suggesting I should be more understanding of family needs. James and Bethany formed a united front against me. When they were together, they would exchange knowing glances or have conversations with double meanings clearly meant to exclude me. In my own home, I became the outsider. As the emotional distance between us grew, James became increasingly controlling in other ways. He questioned my late nights at work, checked my phone when he thought I wasn't looking, and made dismissive comments about my friends. The loving partnership we once had was unraveling rapidly, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Despite everything, I still hoped we could find our way back to each other. I suggested marriage counselling, but James refused, claiming I was trying to get an outsider to validate my financial obsession. I offered to attend family therapy with both him and Bethany to address the deeper issues at play. This suggestion was met with outright mockery. "There's nothing wrong with us," James said. "The one who needs to adjust your priorities and learn what family means." By this point, I had taken significant steps to protect myself financially. I had moved all my income to my personal account, only transferring my portion of the household expenses to our joint account each month. I documented every financial transaction, kept copies of all account statements, and consulted discreetly with a financial advisor colleague about how to protect my assets in case of divorce. These were words I never thought I'd associate with my marriage, but they had become unavoidable. The man I married was disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone who seemed to resent my success and autonomy. The night before everything changed, I found James in our home office, searching through my personal financial documents. When confronted, he didn't even have the decency to appear embarrassed. "I was looking for information about your year-end bonus," he said casually. "Bethany needs to make a down payment on a car, and your bonus would cover it perfectly." I was speechless. Not only was he going through my private papers, but he was already allocating money I hadn't even received yet. Money I'd been planning to use to fix our precarious financial situation. "My bonus is not going to Bethany," I said firmly, "and we need to seriously discuss our financial boundaries before this destroys our marriage completely." "The only thing destroying our marriage is your selfishness," he replied, walking out of the room. That night, I barely slept, wrestling with the painful reality that my marriage might not be salvageable. The next morning would bring the confrontation that would change everything. It started like any other Tuesday. I woke up early to prepare for an important client meeting, trying to maintain some normalcy despite the tension hanging over our home. James was unusually quiet as I made coffee and prepared a simple breakfast of toast and eggs. He sat at our kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. The silence was uncomfortable, but not unusual given our recent conflicts. I was mentally rehearsing my presentation for later that morning when James's phone rang. He answered immediately, his tone changing to one of concern. "Slow down, Beth. What happened?" he asked, standing up and pacing. I could hear Bethany's frantic voice through the speaker, though not her exact words. James glanced at me as he listened, his expression hardening. After a moment, he said, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out. I'll call you back in 5 minutes." He hung up and turned to me, his face unreadable. "Bethany's landlord is threatening eviction. She needs $3,000 today or she'll be out on the street." I took a sip of my coffee, trying to remain calm. "What happened to last month's rent money we gave her? That's not important right now," he snapped. "She needs help." "It is important, James. We gave her rent money 3 weeks ago." This is exactly the pattern I've been trying to address. James's jaw tightened. "She had unexpected expenses. Her car broke down." "The car that was supposedly fixed with the $1,500 we gave her 2 months ago," I countered. His eyes flashed with anger. "Why do you keep tabs like this? This is my sister we're talking about." "I keep tabs because someone has to be responsible with our money," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "We're behind on our own mortgage because of these constant emergencies." James slammed his hand on the counter, making me flinch. "Give me your credit card. I'll handle this myself since you're so heartless." I took a deep breath. "No, James. I'm not giving you my credit card for Bethany again. We need to help her develop actual financial skills instead of enabling this cycle." His face contorted with rage. "You think you're so much better than her, don't you? The successful financial advisor looking down on everyone who struggles. Not everyone has your privileges, Angelina." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. I had grown up in poverty, working multiple jobs to put myself through college, while Bethany had attended an expensive private university funded by her parents. "This isn't about judgment," I said carefully. "It's about setting healthy boundaries. We can help Bethany in other ways." I never finished my sentence. In one swift motion, James grabbed my coffee mug and threw its contents directly at my face. The scalding liquid hit my cheek and neck, the pain immediate and shocking. I gasped more from surprise than pain initially, though the burning sensation quickly intensified. Hot coffee dripped down my blouse as I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. James looked momentarily stunned by his own action, but instead of apologizing, his expression hardened further. "Now look what you made me do," he muttered. I stood up shakily, grabbing a kitchen towel to wipe my face, the pain becoming increasingly intense. The skin on my cheek and neck felt like it was on fire. "James," I whispered, "you just threw hot coffee at me." Instead of showing remorse, he pointed his finger at me accusingly. "If you weren't so selfish, none of this would happen. Family takes care of family, Angelina. But you wouldn't understand that concept." I felt tears welling up partially from the physical pain, but more from the realization that this man, my husband, could hurt me deliberately and feel justified in doing so. As I moved toward the sink to get cold water for my burning skin, James grabbed his keys and briefcase. "Bethany will come to the house later today," he said coldly. "Either give her your credit card or get out. I'm sick of your selfishness destroying this family." With that parting shot, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the framed photos on our entryway wall rattled. I heard his car start and the tires screech as he pulled out of the driveway. In the sudden silence of our kitchen, I gently pressed a cold, wet towel to my face, my mind racing. The burning sensation was subsiding slightly, but the pain of betrayal cut much deeper. I looked around our kitchen. At the breakfast I'd prepared, the coffee splattered across the counter and floor, the home I'd helped build. In that moment, I knew with absolute clarity that this wasn't a relationship I could or should try to salvage. The man who had just thrown hot coffee at my face wasn't the James I had fallen in love with. Perhaps that version of him had never truly existed, or perhaps he had changed beyond recognition. Either way, I couldn't stay. I carefully examined my face in the hallway mirror. An angry red patch spread across my left cheek and down my neck. It would likely blister, but I didn't think it would scar permanently, at least not physically. The emotional scarring was another matter entirely. As I gently applied cold water to my burn, a strange calm settled over me. The decision I had been struggling with for months suddenly became crystal clear. I didn't just need to protect my finances from James and Bethany, I needed to protect myself. The moment James's car disappeared from view, I sprang into action. My first priority was medical attention for the burn. I quickly changed my coffee-soaked clothes, grabbed my purse, and drove to an urgent care clinic near our house. The doctor who examined me was kind but concerned. The coffee had caused second-degree burns on parts of my cheek and neck. As she applied a soothing ointment and dressed the wound, she asked the question I had been dreading. "How did this happen?" I hesitated only briefly before telling the truth. "My husband threw hot coffee at me during an argument." Her expression shifted subtly. "Has anything like this happened before?" she asked carefully. "No," I answered truthfully, "but our relationship has been deteriorating for months." After treating my burns, she stepped out and returned with some pamphlets about domestic violence resources. "Even if this is the first physical incident, what happened is not acceptable and is classified as domestic violence," she explained gently. "These resources might be helpful, and I need to document this injury in your medical record." I nodded, taking the information and giving permission for the documentation. Having a medical record of the incident could be important later, though I hadn't yet fully formed a plan. From the parking lot of the clinic, I called my closest friend Sarah. We had been friends since college, and she had expressed concerns about James's behavior several times over the past year. "He did what?" she exclaimed after I explained what happened. "Angelina, you can't go back there. Come stay with me." "I'm not going back to stay," I assured her, "but I need to get my things and important documents before he returns from work." "I'm coming with you," she insisted. "You shouldn't be alone right now." While waiting for Sarah, I made my second important call to Jason Miller, a divorce attorney one of my clients had recommended months ago. I had saved his number but hoped I would never need to use it. His office scheduled an emergency consultation for later that afternoon. Sarah arrived at the clinic gasping when she saw the bandage on my face. "Oh, Angie," she whispered, hugging me carefully. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." With Sarah by my side, I drove back to the house. We had approximately 6 hours before James typically returned from work. and potentially less if he decided to come home early or bring Bethany directly to the house. My first priority was gathering essential documents: my birth certificate, passport, social security card, financial records, and insurance information. I collected all the documentation of the financial transfers James had made to Bethany, copies of our mortgage statements showing the delinquency and evidence of the unauthorized credit card use. While Sarah helped me pack my clothes and personal items, I called a local moving company that advertised same-day emergency services. They could send a truck and 2 movers within the hour at a premium rate I was more than willing to pay under the circumstances. Next, I called my bank and financial institutions. I transferred all funds from my personal accounts to new accounts at a different bank that James had no connection to. For our joint accounts, I withdrew exactly half of the remaining balances, less than I had contributed, but I wanted to be scrupulously fair. I froze the joint credit cards to prevent any new charges. As I worked, I maintained a detailed inventory of everything I was taking, photographing valuable items and noting their approximate value. I was determined to handle this situation legally and ethically despite the circumstances. The movers arrived promptly and worked efficiently. I directed them to take only items that were clearly mine: my personal belongings, furniture I had owned before our marriage, and a few household items we had specifically purchased as gifts for me. I left all of James's possessions untouched, along with anything that could be considered jointly owned. As the movers loaded the truck, I walked through the house one last time. 5 years of marriage, and it was ending like this, with bandages on my face and strangers carrying my life away in boxes. In our bedroom, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on James's nightstand. The house looked strangely empty with my things gone. The walls held outlines where my artwork had hung, and empty spaces dotted the rooms where my furniture had stood. It wasn't completely barren. James's possessions remained, but it clearly showed a life divided and partially removed. My last call before leaving was to a private investigator recommended by Jason's office. Given James's financial deceptions, I needed professional help uncovering any hidden accounts or assets before the divorce proceedings began. As the moving truck pulled away, bound for a storage facility where I would keep my things until finding a new place to live, Sarah hugged me again. "Are you sure about the next part of your plan?" she asked, worriedly. I nodded, touching the bandage on my face gently. "James needs to understand this is really over. Having Jason here when he returns will send that message clearly." Jason had agreed to meet me at the house at 4:30 p.m, about an hour before James typically returned from work. He would serve as both witness and legal representation when James discovered what had happened. "I'll be nearby," Sarah promised. "Just call if you need me." As Sarah left, I sat alone in what had been my living room, now containing only James's furniture. The house felt like a stage set, familiar but no longer mine. I sent a brief email to my office explaining I had a family emergency and would be taking the rest of the week off. Then I waited for Jason to arrive, mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. Jason arrived precisely at 4:30 p.m, dressed in an impeccable navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He was younger than I expected, perhaps in his early 40s, but his confident demeanour and compassionate manner immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, extending his hand, "I'm very sorry about the circumstances of our meeting." "Please call me Angelina," I replied, gesturing to the nearly empty living room. "As you can see, I've already removed my personal belongings." Jason nodded approvingly. "Very efficient. Many clients struggle with that step." He glanced at the bandage on my face. "Have you documented the injury?" "Yes, I went to urgent care this morning. They photographed and recorded everything." "Excellent. That will be important." He opened his briefcase and extracted some documents. "I've prepared an initial petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty, along with a temporary restraining order application. Based on today's incident, I believe a judge will grant the TRO immediately. We reviewed the paperwork together, Jason explaining each section in clear terms. As we finished, I heard a car pull into the driveway. A quick glance through the window confirmed it was James, and Bethany was with him. "They're here," I said, my heart suddenly racing despite my resolve. "Both of them." Jason stood up, straightening his tie. "Remember, you don't need to engage directly. I'll handle the communication." We heard keys in the lock, then the front door opened. James stepped inside, stopping abruptly when he saw the emptiness of the entryway. Bethany bumped into him from behind. "What the hell?" James muttered, moving further into the house. When he rounded the corner and saw me sitting with Jason, he froze. "Angelina." His eyes darted around the sparse room, then back to my bandaged face, and finally to Jason. "What is this? Who is he?" Bethany appeared behind him, her expression shifting from confusion to anger as she surveyed the half-empty house. Jason stepped forward, extending a business card. "James Bennett, I'm Jason Miller, attorney at law. I represent your wife in divorce proceedings." James ignored the card, his face flushing with anger. "Divorce? What kind of stunt is this, Angelina? Where's all our stuff?" "I've taken only my personal possessions," I replied calmly. "Everything that belongs to you is still here." Bethany pushed past James, her eyes wide. "Where's my stuff? I had things here too." "You don't live here, Bethany," I said. "Anything you left here is still in the guest room." James's shock was morphing rapidly into rage. "You can't just decide to end our marriage and empty our house without discussing it with me," Jason intervened smoothly. "Mr. Bennett, your assault on my client this morning effectively ended any possibility of discussion. I'm serving you with these papers, which include a petition for divorce and a temporary restraining order application." "Assault!" James scoffed, though I noticed his eyes flicker nervously to my bandaged face. "We had a minor disagreement. Accidents happen." "Throwing hot coffee in someone's face isn't an accident," I said quietly. "The urgent care doctor documented second-degree burns." Bethany moved to James's side protectively. "She's obviously exaggerating. James would never hurt anyone intentionally." "Unfortunately for your narrative," Jason replied, "medical documentation doesn't lie. Now, Mr. Bennett, the restraining order hasn't been granted yet, but I strongly advise you to avoid any contact with my client going forward." James's face had gone from red to pale. The reality of the situation seemed to be sinking in. "You're seriously doing this, ending 5 years of marriage because of one bad morning?" "This isn't about one morning, James," I said, finding strength in stating the truth. "This is about months of financial deception, emotional manipulation, and culminating in physical violence. I deserve better." "So you're just leaving, taking your money and running?" His voice had an ugly edge now. "After all I've done for you?" Jason placed a restraining hand on my arm, signaling that I shouldn't engage further, but I needed to say one more thing. "What exactly have you done for me lately, James? Besides lie, steal from our future, and throw hot coffee at my face?" Bethany stepped forward aggressively. "You ungrateful bitch! My brother gave you everything, and this is how you repay him, by ambushing him with some sleazy lawyer and emptying your home." Jason moved between us. "Ms. Bennett, I suggest you moderate your language and approach. Verbal assault could complicate matters further." James pulled Bethany back, his expression calculating now. "This won't work, Angelina. You can't prove I did anything wrong. It'll be your word against mine about this morning." "Actually," I said, "the security camera in our kitchen captured everything." This was a bluff. We didn't have a kitchen camera. But James didn't know that, and his momentary flash of panic told me everything. "We're leaving now," I said, standing up. "The papers explain everything, including the fact that you should not attempt to contact me directly. All communication should go through Jason." As we moved toward the door, James called after me, his voice suddenly pleading. "Angie, wait. We can talk about this." I was stressed and worried about Bethany. "You know I love you." I paused but didn't turn around. "Love doesn't hurt like this, James. I hope someday you understand that." Outside, the afternoon sun felt unexpectedly bright. Jason escorted me to my car, which was parked down the street. "You did very well in there," he said, "but I should warn you, this is just the beginning. Divorce proceedings can get much uglier than what we just saw." "I know," I replied, touching my bandaged cheek gently, "but staying would be much worse." As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. James stood on our front porch watching me leave. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the life and love I had thought we shared. Then I remembered the look in his eyes just before the coffee hit my face, and I knew I was making the only possible choice. In the days following my departure, James launched a campaign to regain control. He called incessantly from different numbers after I blocked his main line. He sent pleading emails alternating between apologies and accusations. When these approaches failed, he escalated. The day after I left, the private investigator I'd hired called with concerning news. "Your husband has been making inquiries about your whereabouts with several mutual contacts. He's also been attempting to access your work email and personal accounts." I immediately enhanced all my security measures, changing passwords and setting up two-factor authentication on everything. My employer's IT department helped secure my work accounts after I explained the situation to my boss, Mark. Mark was supportive beyond my expectations. "Angelina, I'm so sorry this is happening. Take whatever time you need and we'll adjust your client meetings. Your safety comes first." He also offered to have security present at the office, which proved necessary sooner than anticipated. 3 days after I left, James and Bethany appeared in the lobby of my building, demanding to see me. Our security team refused them entry, but Bethany created a scene, shouting that I had stolen from their family and abandoned my husband without explanation. Several colleagues witnessed the spectacle, adding to my humiliation. Mark personally escorted them out, threatening to call police if they returned. Later, he stopped by my office. "I've known you for 7 years, Angelina. You're one of the most honest and dedicated people on our team. Whatever's happening in your personal life, know that your professional reputation is solid here." His words meant more than he could know. James had been systematically undermining my confidence for months, making me question my judgment and values. Having outside validation helped me trust myself again. Meanwhile, Jason was building our case methodically. The financial investigation revealed what I had suspected. James and Bethany had used nearly $50,000 of our money to launch a business venture that had failed within months. They had hidden the loss, continuing to drain our accounts to cover Bethany's lifestyle while the business collapsed. "This level of financial misconduct strengthens our case considerably," Jason explained during one of our meetings. "Combined with the domestic violence incident, we have solid grounds for a favourable settlement." The temporary restraining order was granted legally, preventing James from contacting me or coming near my workplace or temporary residence. Unfortunately, it didn't stop his attempts to manipulate mutual friends and family. James contacted my mother, spinning a story about me having a mental breakdown and abandoning him without warning. Thankfully, my mother knew me better. "He actually suggested I help convince you to come home for your own good," she told me during our weekly call. "I told him the only thing good for you was getting away from someone who would hurt you." Not all relationships weathered the storm so well. Several couples we had been friends with took James's side, believing his portrayal of me as cold, materialistic, and unstable. Social media became a minefield with thinly veiled posts about standing by family during difficult times and the truth behind closed doors. Bethany was particularly vicious online, posting lengthy diatribes about toxic people who abandon their commitments when things get difficult. Though she never named me directly, her followers understood the target of her venom. The most painful betrayal came from Rachel and Daniel, our closest couple friends. We had vacationed together annually, and Rachel had been my confidant during the early troubles with James. Now they refused my calls, and I later learned they had invited James and Bethany for dinner, offering sympathy and support to get through this difficult time. 2 weeks after leaving, I found an apartment in a secure building across town. It was smaller than our house, but felt safer than staying with Sarah, especially after James had begun driving by her place repeatedly. The day I signed the lease, the property manager mentioned an unusual inquiry. A woman called asking if Angelina Bennett had applied for an apartment here. Said she was your sister-in-law and needed to deliver important documents. I didn't confirm or deny anything, of course. Bethany's persistence was becoming concerning. The private investigator suggested she was acting as James's proxy to circumvent the restraining order. I began to wonder what information they were so desperate to obtain or control. The answer came from an unexpected source. My former assistant Taylor reached out with disturbing information. James came to me claiming he needed access to your client files for insurance purposes. When I refused, he offered me money. I think he's looking for something specific. This revelation led to a deeper investigation. With Mark's authorization, our IT security team examined access attempts to my work accounts. They discovered multiple sophisticated intrusion attempts originating from James's architectural firm's IP address. He's trying to access your client data, the IT director explained, possibly looking for high net worth clients or financial information he could leverage. The realization that James might be attempting financial fraud using my professional information was chilling. We immediately notified appropriate authorities and enhanced security measures further. Throughout this turbulent period, my injury healed slowly. The burn on my face faded from angry red to pink, then to a faint discoloration that makeup could cover. The physical pain subsided, but emotional healing proved more challenging. I began seeing Dr. Levine, a therapist specializing in domestic abuse recovery. In our sessions, I grappled with difficult questions. How had I missed the warning signs? How had someone I loved become capable of hurting me? How could I trust my judgment again? What you're experiencing is common among survivors, Dr. Levine explained. Abusers don't begin relationships with violence. They establish trust first, then gradually introduce control and isolation. The progression is often so subtle that by the time physical violence occurs, the victim's support systems and self-confidence are already compromised. Her words helped contextualize my experience. James hadn't changed overnight. He had revealed himself gradually as his manipulation tactics failed against my growing resistance. 1 month after leaving, I received the financial investigator's comprehensive report. James and Bethany's failed business venture was just the tip of the iceberg. They had been planning a much larger scheme involving a luxury wellness retreat, using my credentials as a financial advisor to attract wealthy investors. Documents showed they had already created marketing materials featuring my image and professional biography without permission. This is securities fraud, Jason said grimly when we reviewed the findings. They were essentially planning to use your professional reputation to legitimize a questionable investment opportunity. The evidence was submitted to the divorce proceedings and referred to appropriate regulatory authorities. The case was building strongly in my favor, but the process remained emotionally exhausting. Through it all, I focused on rebuilding my life one day at a time. I furnished my new apartment, re-established routines, and gradually returned to full-time work. Each small decision I made independently felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been overshadowed during my marriage. Sarah remained my steadfast supporter, along with a small circle of friends who saw through James's manipulation. My mother visited for a week, her practical wisdom and unconditional support, providing comfort I hadn't realized I needed. "You know," she said one evening as we shared dinner in my new place, "I never told you this, but I left your father under similar circumstances. The difference is, you recognized what was happening much sooner than I did. I'm proud of you for that." Her revelation stunned me. She had always said my father wasn't ready for family responsibility, and learning that there had been abusive elements to their relationship helped me understand both her strength and her fierce protection of my independence. As weeks turned to months, the acute crisis phase passed. James's attempts at contact became less frequent, though Bethany occasionally created new social media accounts to send me hateful messages. Each time I documented and blocked without responding. The divorce proceedings moved forward methodically. Each legal filing and disclosure brought me closer to the final separation that would allow me to truly move forward. 6 months after leaving, I received an unexpected message from Bethany's former roommate, Leah. "I thought you should know." Her message read, "Bethany's been telling everyone you stole from her and ruined her business. But I lived with her and saw how she spent money she didn't have while claiming hardship. What happened to you wasn't right, and not everyone believes their version of events." This small validation from an unexpected source strengthened my resolve to see the process through to its conclusion, regardless of the narratives James and Bethany continued to spread. The early morning light filtered through the curtains of my apartment as I prepared for an important day. After 8 months of legal proceedings, the final divorce hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I stood before the mirror applying concealer to the faint discoloration still visible on my cheek, a lingering reminder of the moment that had changed everything. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Ready when you are, we've got this." Sarah had insisted on accompanying me to the courthouse for moral support. Though Jason assured me the proceedings were largely procedural at this point, having negotiated a settlement agreement, James had finally accepted the prospect of seeing him again, sent waves of anxiety through me. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, meeting Sarah and Jason in the lobby. Jason reviewed the key points one last time. "The judge has all the documentation, including the medical reports, financial investigations, and evidence of attempted fraud. Given the circumstances, the settlement terms are quite favourable to you. Under the agreement, I would retain my personal assets and retirement accounts. James would keep the house, but was required to refinance to remove my name from the mortgage within 90 days. Most importantly, the agreement included a permanent restraining order and non-disclosure provisions preventing both James and Bethany from contacting me or publicly discussing our relationship. There's one more thing," Jason added. "James has requested 5 minutes to address you directly before the proceedings. You're under no obligation to agree." I considered this unexpected request. "What do you think his motivation is? Honestly, most likely one final attempt to manipulate the narrative, but refusing might make you appear uncooperative to the judge." After a moment's reflection, I nodded. "I'll hear him out, but I want you present." We were directed to a small conference room. Minutes later, James entered, looking thinner and more dishevelled than I remembered. The confident, charming man I had married seemed diminished somehow. "Angelina," he said quietly, remaining standing as I had not invited him to sit. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." I simply nodded, waiting. "I wanted to say," he began, then faltered. "Things got out of control. That morning with the coffee, I've replayed it 1,000 times. I never meant to hurt you." His words lacked genuine remorse, focusing on his intent rather than my experience. The old James would have known exactly what to say to make me doubt myself, but I was different now. "James," I replied calmly, "intent doesn't erase impact. You did hurt me both physically and emotionally, and your actions since then, attempting to access my client information, spreading falsehoods among our friends, using Bethany to circumvent the restraining order, demonstrate that your primary concern has always been control, not reconciliation." He flinched slightly. "Is that what you think, that I was trying to control you? I think you became accustomed to accessing my resources without accountability. When I established boundaries, you escalated from manipulation to violence. That's not love, James. It's exploitation." His expression hardened. "So, that's it, 5 years dismissed because of one bad moment." "No," I corrected him. 5 years re-evaluated because your actions revealed your true priorities. I deserved better then, and I deserve better now. Our conversation was interrupted by the bailiff announcing it was time to enter the courtroom. As we stood to leave, James made one final attempt. "Bethany's struggling, you know. This whole situation has been hard on her too." I regarded him steadily. "Bethany is an adult responsible for her own choices just as you are for yours. My obligation to subsidize her lifestyle ended the moment you threw coffee in my face." In the courtroom, the proceedings unfolded efficiently. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement, noted the documented domestic violence, and asked if either party wished to make a statement. James declined, appearing resigned. When my turn came, I stood and addressed the court briefly. "Your Honour, I entered my marriage in good faith and tried to preserve it despite mounting concerns. The incident that precipitated our separation wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of escalating control and abuse. I seek only to close this chapter with dignity and move forward independently." The judge nodded, signed the final decree, and with a stroke of her pen, my marriage was legally dissolved. Outside the courtroom, Sarah hugged me tightly. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. Lighter, like I can finally take a full breath. The following weeks brought practical adjustments as I formally reclaimed my maiden name on legal documents and financial accounts. Each change represented another step toward the independent identity I was rebuilding. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email from Bethany. Despite the non-contact provision, I opened it cautiously. "I won't pretend to like you," she wrote, "but I've been doing therapy as part of my debt management program. My therapist suggested I examine my role in what happened. I still think you could have handled things differently, but I acknowledge now that my financial behavior put strain on your marriage. That's all I wanted to say." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, more than I had expected from her. I forwarded the message to Jason without responding directly, and we agreed to document it, but take no further action if the contact wasn't repeated. Around the same time, I was approached by a local women's shelter about speaking at a financial empowerment workshop. My experience had taught me how financial abuse often precedes physical violence and how economic independence creates options for women in destructive relationships. That first workshop led to others, and I gradually developed a volunteer program providing financial literacy education to domestic violence survivors. The work became an unexpected source of healing, transforming my painful experience into something that could help others. A year after leaving James, I sat in my office reviewing client portfolios when Mark knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" he asked. "I have news you should hear." He closed the door and sat across from me. "James's architectural firm is under investigation for financial irregularities. Apparently, he's been misappropriating client funds for personal use." The information shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. How did they discover it? "Bethany reported him," Mark said. "According to my contact at the regulatory board, she provided detailed documentation going back several years." I absorbed this unexpected twist. Whatever her motivation, revenge, self-preservation, or perhaps genuine growth, Bethany had finally chosen accountability over enabling. It was a choice I understood intimately. That evening, I walked through my apartment, now truly my home, filled with objects and arrangements that reflected only my preferences. On my desk sat a framed quote I had found during my recovery. "The most courageous decision you make each day is the decision to be in control of your own life." The journey from that horrific morning to the present hadn't been linear or simple. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, and lingering pain. But sitting in my peaceful space, I recognized how far I had come. The woman who had once flinched at a raised voice now advocated for others in similar situations. The professional who had doubted her judgment now mentored younger colleagues with confidence. The person who had once defined herself through a relationship now stood complete on her own. My phone chimed with a message from Sarah confirming our weekend hiking plans. Next to it was an email from the women's shelter requesting additional workshops. Life continued to unfold with new possibilities I couldn't have imagined while trapped in the diminishing circle of my marriage. The burn on my cheek had faded to near invisibility, but its lesson remained vivid. Sometimes the most painful moments become our most powerful catalysts for change. In choosing to leave, I had found not just safety, but strength I never knew I possessed. Looking back now, I can trace the long arc of my journey from that terrible morning to where I stand today. It's been exactly 15 months since I walked away from my marriage, leaving behind not just a house and a husband, but a version of myself that had become increasingly diminished. The divorce was finalized 9 months ago, granting me legal closure. The financial settlement wasn't what mattered most in the end, though I did recover most of my personal assets and received compensation for the unauthorized use of my professional credentials. What proved most valuable was the clean break and the restraining order that created space for me to rebuild. After the courtroom confrontation, I had no direct contact with James. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned he eventually sold our house at a loss and relocated to another state following the investigation into his firm's financial practices. Bethany apparently moved with him initially, but later returned, supposedly attending community college and working at a local restaurant. Their continued choices were no longer my concern. I had learned to release responsibility for others' actions while taking full ownership of my own path forward. The physical healing came first. The burn on my face required several dermatologist appointments, but diligent care prevented permanent scarring. Only in certain lights can I detect the faint discoloration, a reminder not of victimhood, but of survival. The emotional healing proved more complex, but equally possible. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Levine helped me process the relationship patterns that had developed gradually, almost imperceptibly, until crisis made them impossible to ignore. I learned to identify red flags I had previously rationalized and to understand how financial control operates as a form of abuse. Abusers don't present themselves as villains. Dr. Levine often reminded me, they show you their best self until you're invested, then gradually reveal their worst while making you question your perceptions. This insight helped me reconcile the James I thought I knew with the man who ultimately harmed me. It wasn't that I had been blind or foolish, rather the manipulation had been skillful and incremental. Professional restoration followed. I returned to my position with renewed focus and boundaries. Mark continued to be a supportive mentor, eventually recommending me for a senior management role, overseeing our firm's client education initiatives. Your ability to explain complex financial concepts with empathy is exceptional, he noted during my performance review. Especially now when clients are seeing how financial literacy directly impacts their security and options. My volunteer work with domestic violence survivors expanded as well. What began as occasional workshops evolved into a structured program teaching financial independence skills, helping women create escape funds, understand credit management, and develop income strategies became my most meaningful work. Sandra, a program participant who had left an abusive marriage with 3 children and minimal resources, later sent me a note that I keep framed beside my desk. You showed me money isn't just about survival, it's about choices. My kids now see what strength looks like. The social rebuilding took longest. Some friendships never recovered after James's campaign to portray me as unstable and materialistic. Rachel and Daniel, our once closest friends, sent a tentative message after news of James's financial misconduct became public, but by then I had recognized the value of allies who stand firm during difficulties, not just after vindication. Sarah remained my steadfast supporter, joined by colleagues who became friends and new connections I made through volunteer work and community activities. My circle became smaller but significantly stronger, filled with people who valued authenticity over appearance. I dated occasionally, approaching relationships with both greater caution and greater clarity about my non-negotiable boundaries. I no longer felt compelled to find a partner to complete my life, having discovered my own sufficiency. If the right relationship eventually develops, it will be an addition to an already full existence, not a defining element of my identity. Perhaps the most profound change has been internal. The constant anxiety and self-doubt that characterized my final months with James have been replaced by a quiet confidence in my perceptions and decisions. I trust myself again, not with blind certainty, but with the balanced assessment of someone who has faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Last month, I was invited to share my story at a conference for financial professionals focused on recognizing and addressing financial abuse. Standing before colleagues from across the industry, I spoke openly about my experience connecting personal narrative to professional responsibility. Financial abuse often precedes physical violence, I explained. As advisors, we may be uniquely positioned to recognize warning signs when clients' financial autonomy is being compromised. This awareness isn't just about professional ethics, it could literally save lives. After the presentation, a woman approached me privately. Her hands trembled slightly as she described her own situation: a controlling husband who tracked every purchase, required receipts for household expenses, and became enraged at any independent financial decision. "I've been telling myself it's just his personality," she said quietly. "He's never hit me, so I didn't think it qualified as abuse. But listening to you, I recognized every pattern." I connected her with local resources and my contact information, knowing that recognition is only the first step in a difficult journey. Whether she chooses to leave immediately, develop a long-term exit strategy, or attempt to reset boundaries within the relationship, the crucial element is her reclamation of choice. That conversation crystallized what I've come to understand through my own experience. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer others is the truth of our stories, unvarnished and complete. The coffee thrown in anger left physical burns that have healed, but the telling of that moment and everything before and after creates possibility for others still living in similar situations. I no longer define myself by what happened that morning in my kitchen. That incident was a turning point, not a destination. The woman I've become since then, more compassionate, more determined, more authentically herself, is the product of countless choices made in freedom, not fear. If there's wisdom I've gained worth sharing, it's this: true love expands your world and your sense of self. It never diminishes or isolates you. Financial independence isn't selfishness, it's essential security, and leaving a destructive situation isn't failure. It's often the first step toward the life you actually deserve. For anyone watching this who recognizes their own relationship in elements of my story, please know you're not alone. Whether the control is financial, emotional, or physical, you deserve support and options. Reach out to local resources, make safety plans, and remember that small steps toward freedom add up over time. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced financial control in a relationship? What helped you recognize unhealthy patterns? Your insights might help someone else who needs to hear exactly your perspective. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel for more authentic conversations about life's challenges and how we navigate them. Like and share this video if you think it could help someone who needs this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that healing isn't linear, but it is possible. The life waiting on the other side of difficult choices might be more beautiful than you can currently imagine.